but also gracing our Deccan Birders annual dinner function, for which I fought tooth and nail to bring Kalyan as our chief guest. I remember I decided that we'll call Kalyan as our chief guest, and then Kalyan had gone off for his shoot. He confirmed, yes, I'll come, and then he gone off for his shoot all over the countries. So he has this reply, auto reply mail, you know. So when I say, where are you? He is confirmed, okay, 28th September. So I say, oh, where are you? And then in the auto will shoot off that busy till tuck, 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 this date, so can't talk. And I'm immediately, Ashish, Kalyan is not to be found. What about my 28th? Ashish said, relax. He said, he'll come. So there's a long gap, and then Kalyan was in somewhere out in the wilderness. As soon as he came back to civilization, when he sent an email to Ashish, then I just relaxed, and I was totally looking forward to this wonderful function that we're going to have with Kalyan as our chief guest. And I request now our Vice President Birdwatchers to give us the welcome address.
If you ask him, he will say he came back from civilization into wilderness.
I should redo that.
Okay, good evening to everybody. Welcome to this lovely evening. All of you know that Birdwatchers Society, now Deccan Birders, started in 1980. So next year we'll be completing 40 years of our existence, and it's been a wonderful journey all along. You know, when we started, I think I joined sometime in 1988, but when we started in 1980, it was a motley group of less than 10 people who were very enthusiastic and looked around places in and around Hyderabad. In the last 40 years or so, we have now morphed into a fairly large group of more than 450 people. All of you are aware of what are the kind of activities that we do. Mainly we look at having field trips every month. We have indoor meetings. We do Asian waterfowl census, and we interact with the forest department by sharing with them the kind of birds that we watch and the lists that we do. The objectives of the society, right from the time when it was Birdwatchers Society of Andhra Pradesh to now it is Deccan Birders, the obvious reason being the state split, and whenever we went to meet the department, they used to ask us why it is still Andhra Pradesh and not Telangana. So we had a lot of debate, and we thought the best is to be staying neutral, not get into this kind of a politicization. So we felt Deccan Birders was a better name encompassing a larger region, but the objects of the society remain the same, spreading the message of bird conservation. And just I thought this is a time when we meet annually to reiterate a couple of the objects of the society, which is basically to inculcate a spirit of adventure, to impress upon people the role of avifauna, to inculcate a sense of responsibility towards maintaining the environment, to work for the protection and conservation of bird sanctuaries, especially in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, and basically to promote the knowledge of ornithology. Typically, members meet once a month during the field outings and also during the indoor meetings where some presentations and film shows are shown. In the last couple of years, we have looked at trying to increase this, but about a decade ago, the society thought that we should have one day of the year where members meet one evening along with their families and friends to listen to eminent speakers. And it's almost a decade now that we have been having this event regularly. So today we have Kalyan here. We thank him for accepting our invitation and being here. I'm sure all of you are looking forward to it. Our president, Mr. JVD Murthy, unfortunately had to go out of the country, and so he's not here. He conveys his best wishes for the evening. And on behalf of the entire executive committee, I thank Kalyan for being here and all of you for being here on this evening. I'm sure you're looking forward to a fantastic talk. Thank you, and over to Kalyan.
I can speak without going here? I can speak? Now I'm sure you all are waiting to hear Kalyan more than you are waiting to hear me. I understand, but then I have to introduce Kalyan and underline his achievements. Kalyan is a wildlife photographer, filmmaker, conservationist, naturalist, and explorer. Besides all this, I found, although there is so much on his plate and he's so renowned, Kalyan is basically a very simple guy. I think simple and then high achieving, it shows. And he has worked on many landmark blue chip wildlife series for the BBC and National Geographic Channel. His work has appeared in many publications worldwide, including National Geographic, Nature, Guardian, BBC Wildlife, Geo, Smithsonian, and Lonely Planet. He is the founder of India Nature Watch, co-founder of Nature in Focus, and in the last few years, he has been working on various documentaries for many international productions. He freelances with the BBC Natural History Unit and National Geographic Channel. There are many feathers in his cap. To recount a few, he is the Sanctuary Asia Wildlife Photographer of the year 2015 and BBC Wildlife Photographer of the year 2013, Carl Zeiss Wildlife Conservation Award 2017, and there are more, guys. He, amongst the scores of films, documentaries that he has made, his recent film Wild Karnataka has won much acclaim. His film on the swamp tigers of Sundarbans, on which he spent, brace yourself, 600 hours and almost 24 hours of the day he was in Sundarbans and the mangrove, and he lived in the boat, so it's not even 12 hours, it's 24 hours. So that's how, and he's lucky enough to, I think the most luckiest thing, to see the tiger, Sundarbans tiger, walk 1 kilometer along the shore. So imagine the kind of footage you get when it walks 1 kilometer along the shore, and it appeared only once. So we are all looking forward to see that. And this Swamp Tigers of Sundarbans has been nominated for this year's Emmy Awards. A big round of applause. So after recounting all this, we are again, I'm telling every one of you, all the members, non-members, everybody, that we are so happy to have Kalyan on this day, and the floor is all Kalyan's, and we are all eager to see what's in store for us. I'm sure it will be a most enjoyable and learning experience for all of us. Kalyan, please.
Sorry, you'll have to please adjust. It's okay, you can walk around. It's okay. Okay. Thank you for the very generous introduction, and it's my pleasure to be here. I'm originally from Andhra Pradesh, but settled now in Bangalore. I know a lot of friends here. It's great to be back here, and especially on your annual day. So it's quite a privilege for me. So today I wanted to talk about what I do. I mean, in some sense, at the end of the day, I'm a storyteller. You know, the medium can be different. I write, I photograph, I make more and more wildlife films. But along the journey, you know, you discover a lot of very interesting things. And I want to talk about two of these journeys specifically today that I've gone through. It's not the films itself, but in the process of making the film, you come across some interesting things in the field. But I want to come back to story because at the end of the day, you know, some of you are photographers here and things like that, right? What connects us to a visual image is it's not the shutter speed or the ISO or the perfect, you know, sharp lens. It's the emotional content of that photograph itself. So in the work I do, I'm sure a lot of you know this, you know, our human brain has two distinct parts, you know, the left side, right side. Left side is responsible for all the memory, reasoning and things like that, whereas the right side is responsible for all your emotions primarily. And me as a storyteller, when somebody looks at my photo or something and says, you know, oh, what an amazing picture, you know, that you used an amazing lens, I think I failed. And I want somebody to look at the picture and say, you know, it made me cry, it made me laugh. You know, I think I want that emotional connect. And stories is really the best way to connect people to environment, especially. And I think we're living in an age, I think all of you have been following the climate change protest that's been happening in the last 1 week or so. And the way we can make people care for environment is making them care. So how do you tell these stories? Again, how do you make people care? So it comes a lot down to aesthetics and storytelling. I'll give an example. There's a photo of I'm sure all of you know about the vulture decline. Can all of you hear me without this? Yeah. All of you know about the vulture decline that's happened in India, right? And how do you communicate this positive or negative stories using a single image? So this is an image I took a long time ago, you know, and you know, in a photograph, just to get slightly technical, you can crop an image. That is, you cut the image to suit your story in some sense. So I can, you know, cut the image in a way where it's on the right of the frame or in a way where it's on the left of the frame. It's the same image really, you know, just there's more space on either side. The reason I'm saying this is because, you know, when the vulture decline started, I took this photo a long time ago, like I said. When the vulture decline started, some of the wildlife magazines, they wanted to communicate this, that vultures were on the decline, on the way out as a species. Which image do you think conveys that? This or this? This one, right? So clearly, because it's on the frame, it's on its way out, right? It's about to fly out of the frame, but as a species also it's about to go extinct. So it's very interesting because the magazine carried an article, I mean, there's not the original layout, but a layout like this where the vultures it's about to go out of the frame, vultures on the edge. But the reason I find this fascinating is because the same magazine, it's actually Sanctuary Asia, a couple of years later was doing a positive story about, because since then we've had a ban on diclofenac, you know, the drug that was responsible, but we also have captive breeding programs now. So the same magazine took the same image, but they used a different composition of it. You know, so it's a very positive composition here where the vultures actually coming back, you know, and the title of the thing was Return of the Vultures. So even, I mean, as a photographer, you know, it's that you need to think about what the image is trying to communicate. And sometimes it's important to zoom out as well. You know, when you guys travel around, I'm sure you see that's a dead southern birdwing, one of the largest butterflies of India. But just by zooming out, you can tell the context of what's happening. For me, this is a case of it's just a dead butterfly, but this one communicates that how the butterfly died because of roads and the traffic and things like that. So with that context, I want to talk about two stories that I've done. Okay, the first one is slightly sad, so bear with me. I will end my talk with positive, but you know, I think all of us need to understand this. This is the story about this girl. Her name is Suprita. She lives in a rural Karnataka close to Hassan, and You know, in India, rural India, they don't send girl child to higher education. You know, it's only the boys who get the privilege. But whereas her parents were very open, and she was one of the bright students in school, and were really supportive of. She was one of the 2 girls in that whole village who would still go to school. And in 2014, she was going to her 10th standard board exam, and she was going with her classmate, and on the way, an elephant came and killed her. Okay, she died right away. It broke the family, because not just the family, the whole village, because you know, she was one of the brightest child, and for somebody unfortunate to go that way. Okay, what this led to, and this is a place where they had a lot of human elephant conflict before. Many people have died before, but you know, when this young girl died, it really made people angry. So they protested on the streets, they blocked the highway, and the forest, I mean, they really insisted that forest department had to do something. And in 2014, forest department unfortunately was under pressure to do something about it. So the High Court, Karnataka High Court got involved, and they came up with this very historic decision where they said that this taluk in Hassan district should not have elephants. Okay, it was a High Court judgment that the forest department had to follow. But you know, it's very easy to say, catch all the elephants in this area. You know, it was just literally 3 lines in a scientific document. But do any of you know what it takes to capture an elephant? So it's a short film. It's 4 minutes long, just to show you what happens when you capture an elephant, or rather, how do you capture an elephant? story. I know that's a bit hard to watch, but it's important that you watch it, and I'll tell you why. This is a positive elephant story, by the way. I know it's sad, but this. So what do you do when you catch these elephants? And you know, the forest department has tried before is trying to put them in a forest somewhere else, but these elephants always come back. You know, because they have homing instinct, and although they were released within a few weeks, they would be back where they were caught. So, well, the forest department was they had no option but to take them into captivity, and this one, and you saw that elephant that was captured in the night, loaded in the truck. That's the same elephant that killed this girl Suprita. Okay, it's very unfortunate because that incident that day in February of 2014 broke the family, but also broke the elephant family. And to tame an elephant, you know, you really have to starve them, you know, keep training them. And where do these elephants eventually end up? You know, you go to these elephant joyrides and parks, and more and more in South India they're being used in festivals and things like that. Okay, so what I at least request you is next time you go on an elephant ride, whatever, remember that they come from a very dark past, and we are fueling the demand where we are forced to catch more elephants from the wild. But I'll tell you why this is a positive story. You know, it's, you know, the reason I'm telling you the story of Suprita is because her parents, you know, obviously clearly upset with her daughter's death. The father especially is a great believer in elephants. You know, he loves elephants, and even after this elephant killed his daughter, he's not angry at the elephants itself. And for the last 3 years, something interesting has been happening. That elephant I showed you, we just caught in the wild, he's been trained now. He's been called Shrikanta. It's in one of the elephant camps in Karnataka, and since the last 3 years, it's one of the elephants that they get to the Dashera festival, which is actually happening next week. And the beautiful part of this story is that the parents of Suprita, in the last 3 years, been going to Dashera festival and taking blessings from the very individual elephant that killed their daughter. For me, I think this gives me hope, because I think if a father is able to forgive the creature that's killed his daughter, I think that's what really gives me hope in India. Being able to, people accommodating wildlife even when it affects them deeply. Yeah. So that's one story I want to talk about. This is another interesting journey I went, and the reason I'm talking about this is because all of you must know about the Great Indian Bustard, right? GIB, it's probably one of the most endangered bird in our country. I don't know how many of you know, in the 70s it was considered as the national bird of India instead of peacock. But I think it was Salim Ali who said, Salim Ali, somebody else who said, if somebody misspelled the word, it wouldn't look very nice. So I'll tell you, so this is something, a project again I did a couple of years ago, which is, I try to understand migrations of both wildlife and people. And I've gone through 3 phases in this. First of all, many of you know about the wildebeest migration that happens in Africa. You have millions of wildebeest that cross from Tanzania to Kenya and they come back. How does that happen? How does that happen? And the way I understood that was spending some time with the local Maasai tribes who also follow with lakhs and lakhs of cattle along with them. The reason there are millions of that small, I mean, it's relatively big compared to Indian parks, but the place is able to retain so much wildebeest is because they're on the move all the time. If they were in one place, they would overgraze the area, eat up the grass, and there wouldn't be enough grass to have such large numbers. The reason you have millions of wildebeest is because they're migrating all the time. They're never in one place. And that's a very important thing about animal migration, and this is not induced by humans, but it's something that animals do themselves. And they've realized, especially in Africa, that by keeping on the move, they can, as a species, can have a lot more numbers and sustain more numbers. This came to my second realization when I spent 2 months with him. His name is Mahendra. He's from a Dangar community, you know, the shepherding community that you have in Deccan, basically, you know, the northern Karnataka, Maharashtra, and parts of Telangana and AP as well. And these guys essentially are shepherds. You know, they have lots of, actually thousands of sheep. Each family carries thousands of sheep, and they migrate. Every monsoon, they start all the way from Mumbai, they cut across Maharashtra, come till Andhra Pradesh, graze for a few months, and they go back. It's about a 400-kilometer journey that they make with so many sheep. They create one of, today I know a lot of people were talking about traffic jam, traffic in Hyderabad, and I'm from Bangalore, so you can know how bad it is. But these dangas create the biggest traffic jam in India. When they have to cross 10,000 sheep across the Pune-Mumbai highway. Sometimes the traffic jam is about 3 hours long. But what's interesting about this is the landscape that they live in. They need the same kind of, so they need basically grass, fresh grass. And historically, this is all wasteland which people could walk around. But more and more in India, that land is disappearing. It's either taken up by SEZ or an industrial area. Because in India, officially the government of India classifies a landscape like this as wasteland because there are no trees growing there. Okay, so they migrate about these what I call village commons. Villages have revenue land which is specifically meant for grazing. So anyway, the reason I was showing this is because I met Mahendra. He said, "Oh, do you know wolves follow me wherever I go?" I was very fascinated. What do you mean wolves follow you? He said, "Yeah, I have my own pack of wolves that follow me wherever I go." And I said, "No, that can't be true." He said, "If you don't trust me, you come with me and stay with me for a month." So I trusted him and I went with a special camera. It's called a thermal camera, where in pitch darkness you can see, because it picks up the heat signature of these animals. So it's a short sequence I had done for a film for BBC. I'll just play you that clip.
She is staking their lives on the monsoon to bring them fresh meat. Sheep and goats are the staple diet of most Indian wolves. And they go where the grass is greenest. A journey where old India meets new. Mahendra leads his livestock and his extended family on a never-ending quest for fresh pasture. They've been on the move for 8 months. Now, with rain on the way, they're heading for their homeland. The striped hyena is the wolf's main competitor, and will often chase a wolf from a carcass. She too needs to hunt if she is to provide milk for her cubs. Home at last, just ahead of the monsoon rains. once barren land green again. The only protection the sheep will have is a flimsy net, and it must be up before sundown. Guard dogs have nail-studded collars for their protection. It's at night that the predators will come. When the light fades, a thermal camera reveals what the naked eye can't see. Warm bodies glow white. The net is not secure. Hyenas. Their scent drifts on the wind. The dogs have been bred to be fearless. And the hyenas can't afford to risk injury. Wolves. A wolf bit through the top rope of the net.
Okay. So what is interesting, fascinating is that in these landscapes the wolves actually migrate. The dungars are migrating with their sheep, the wolves are actually migrating with the dungars. But like what I've learned in Maasai, with the Maasai community there, and with this community as well, is their extreme amazing knowledge about natural history. Okay, so even with the shepherds, you know, they had a very interesting algorithm. In fact, because I was migrating with them, what was interesting was the birds in that landscape were migrating with the sheep, because wherever the sheep and goats are going, they're disturbing the understory, which disturbs all the insects, which attracts the birds. So it was very interesting because it was this dungars going, sheep going, and all the birds following them. And they really care for the animal, but you know, they have what they call a very interesting algorithm, you know, and I kind of try to decode what they do. So one of the things they do is they never go to the same place in the same season again. They go to a place and they keep moving, and they have this kind of zigzag route which they never come back to the same place. And they spend more time if the grass is good, okay, but not too long where the sheep will overgraze the grass. And they like to keep on the move. You know, their thing is that if you stop anywhere, their sheep will destroy the local grasses and the local ecosystems. So having good grasslands was as important for the shepherds as it is for wildlife lovers like us. And the amount of, like I said, the amount of time they spend is more important than the numbers that they have. So for them, there's more grass, there's more sheep, and they really feel that fire has a very important ecosystem to play in these grasslands, because in fact they sometimes put the fire themselves, because if the grass is completely dried up, and you know this, when there's a fire in the grasslands, fresh roots come out within few days, so it's fresh fodder for the sheep. And they also enhancing the landscape by grazing, defecating, stomping, and salivating into this ground, so essentially putting nutrients back in these grasslands. And they feel that the predator-prey relationship started because of these migrations, and I'll tell you why. They feel that, this is during evolutionary process, okay, it's these wolves that keep wild animals on their, so actually when they're migrating, they even have black bucks and chinkaras joining them at various parts, and their observation is that if the wolves weren't there, predators weren't there in grassland ecosystem, the animals would be in the same place and overgraze the area. It's because of these predators like wolves, they are keeping the animal on the move all the time, which is keeping the health of the grasslands intact. It's quite fascinating to learn that, and you can see the similar patterns from around the world. And I want to come to bustards. Where does the bustards fit into all this? As you know, we have probably less than 150 left in our country. It's quite a spectacle bird. If you haven't seen it, please see it, because we might not have this bird for a long time. So again, I'm not a scientist, okay, and I could be factually wrong here, but what I'm sharing is purely information that I'm able to put together by meeting and talking to a lot of these people. Do you know how many Great Indian Bustard sanctuaries are there in India right now? Any guesses? Sorry? 9 actually, yeah. So there are totally 9 sanctuaries dedicated for Great Indian Bustards. Do you know how many of them have bustards? Yes, only one. The Desert National Park is the only one where it's there. In Andhra Pradesh, from Rolapadu, they've disappeared. Karnataka, they've disappeared. Nanaj, a very famous place in Maharashtra, where they've disappeared.
There was this in Rajasthan.
Desert National Park, that's in Rajasthan, yes. So it's very interesting, right? The government of India has actually declared these national parks specifically to save an animal, a bird in this case, fenced it, keeping all the intrusions out and things like that, but yet the bird has disappeared. And we don't know yet. It's not like vultures where a drug is killing them off or something like that. It could be, but from my understanding so far is that they're just disappearing. And this is where I think we need to look at this historical context of how this grassland ecosystems and Great Indian Bustards fit in. And this is more and more studies from actually wildlife biologists is showing this. This is what is done when the minute you declare a sanctuary. You fence it, and the primary thing that the forest department does is to keep grazers out. You have cattle or sheep are coming in, which might destroy the grassland. So traditionally, most of the landscape look like this. It's what I was saying as village commons, and people and wildlife have been living in lot of these grassland areas. If you go to places like places in Rajasthan and Gujarat, where you see amazing wild birds living in villages with people and things like that. But like I said, because this landscape is classified as wasteland, they fence the small area, and the rest of the area is let out for development. Okay. Unfortunately, some of these areas come in not in the wildlife division, but in the territorial division, where a lot of these landscapes, which is actually beautiful habitat for GIBs and wolves, is used for planting. All of us agree planting is good, but certain habitats need to be left intact. They're meant to be grasslands, and this is the landscapes we're converting. And even worse, in a state like Gujarat now, a lot of these landscapes have actually been given out for green energy. Okay, so Like I said, India has about 150 odd busters left. And do you know that there are busters in Telangana, Andhra Pradesh now, and in Karnataka? There are about 8 bustards in South India right now. All of them are in farmers' cotton fields, not in a protected area national park. Okay, so we really have to relook at how we manage these grasslands. And the reason if you think about it, why is it that these bustards are not in the protected, beautiful natural grasslands, but they are actually pretty much out of 150 bustards, more than 120 bustards are actually outside protected areas in somebody's farm somewhere? Why is it happening? And when we looked at some of the data in Africa, actually we don't have much studies about GIBs in India, but in Africa, I mean, you get the Kori bustard, it's a different species. They found that when you fence an area and keep all the cattle out, the grass grows too much, too high, and the bustards can't display to each other, because during the breeding time they need to display to each other. So they figured out that it's not the Great Indian bustard but the Kori bustard in Africa. They figured out that having little bit, not overgrazing, I do agree that sometimes people tend to overgraze, but little bit of that Maasai cattle coming in and grazing on the little bit of grass, that the bustards there really love that place. So maybe is that what, I don't know, there's no science behind it, there's no science behind from what I'm saying, but is this what we are missing out in India to save the rarest bird in India? Maybe we actually have to rethink about how we protect land, maybe let a little bit of the grazing in, and literature and examples show that little bit of, not overgrazing, but little bit of grazing is actually good for the species. These animals prefer that. Even wolves in India, for example, Y.V. Jala, he's a famous scientist from Wildlife Institute, he did his PhD on wolves, and he found that 98% of wolves' diet in India is sheep and goat. Very little live prey. Okay. In fact, the reason we have wolves is because they actually feed on this cattle, and again 90+ population of wolves are outside protected areas. These are in the outside villages in various areas. So maybe, like I said, I think I really want you guys to think about, and I know we have presence from Forest Department also, is how we relook at protecting this landscape. And I'm not saying that let cattle into tiger reserves and all that. I'm just saying specifically grassland ecosystems, dry grasslands ecosystems can use a little bit of grazing, and we as bird watchers, or people who care for environment, really have to relook at how we draw those boundaries. But also this is about justice to people as well. So one of the things I learned with Mahendra was that he's not a fan of Forest Department, because one is, of course, a lot of this land went off for industrial areas, and then some grasslands were there, and conservationists like us went and said, this has to be protected. So they put a big fence around it where he can't take his cattle now. Okay, and I walked with him 5 years ago, and I spoke to him last year, and he was saying that there's so many barriers now that he might not be able to migrate anymore. His children won't migrate anymore. And then what happens to all these wolves in this landscape, which completely depend on these livestock and the migrations? Okay, and busters are also a species which migrate in short distances. So but with all that sad news, but I just want to show this picture which came last evening. Rajasthan has managed to the first captive breeding of Great Indian bustard. So first chick was born actually just from yesterday. So we are probably in a path of recovery, and when we put these birds back in the wild, I think we really have to see how we do it. So so that's what my talk was about, and I really wanted you to rethink about what ecosystems are and pristine versus other ecosystems. So I want to end my talk with maybe not a conservation film. I mean, I've been doing a lot of conservation film, but I also realize, and there are a lot of children, young people in this auditorium, you can't talk about environment and conservation without first getting fascinated by wildlife. All of us might participate in a climate protest tomorrow. It's because we are all converts here. You're in this room because you like wildlife, you like watching birds. So I really felt that before I tell somebody, especially let's say my parents, or my mother who's not at all into wildlife, if I ask her and say, can you save Great Indian bustard? She's like, what? Please. Okay. So I realized that I need to get them fascinated about this wildlife before they even talk about conservation. Okay. So in the last couple of years, I've gone back to doing from these conservation stories to doing those pretty stories where you make people fall in love with wildlife. So one of the projects that me and my colleagues did in the last couple of years was working closely with Karnataka Forest Department, and many of you have seen it. It's called Wild Karnataka. I just want to play the trailer of it, and just to celebrate. I really think we need to celebrate the wildlife we have. And although we've talked about depressing stories about great Indian busters disappearing and things like that, and I don't know who the conversation I was having with this morning or somebody. India as a country, with 350 plus people per square kilometer, with so much poverty, with aspiration of an 8+% GDP, we still able to conserve so much wildlife. No other country, if you see in that lens, no other country has managed to do that. And one of the reasons I want to spoke about that elephant thing is also because people in India forgive wildlife. If you look at any Western country, in fact there was a news last week, there's a puma that came. It didn't even attack a person. It came near a school in Arizona. Immediately the wildlife department went out in a helicopter and shot the puma. The puma hasn't attacked anybody, okay, because it's a public threat. And we talk about European countries which are very advanced and environment friendly, but they can't stand a single wolf. They have probably less than a dozen wolves, and each time a wolf shows up they go and shoot it down. Whereas in India, even when a tiger or an elephant has come and killed 4-5 people, we still don't go and shoot it down. We actually, forest department goes out, tries to catch it, gives it a second lease of life. So I really think that we need to celebrate this wildlife. My first film with the forest department was Wild Karnataka, so I'll show you the trailer and then I'm happy to take some questions.
Karnataka contains some of the richest wild places left on Earth. Quarter of all India's plant and animal species are found here. It's one of the last places where big wild animals can roam in safety. We are about to travel across this diverse land. The mountain rainforests of the Western Ghats to the ancient rocks of the Deccan Plateau, from the rich jungles of the south and over the water that transform the land. And we will reveal wonders. This is the story of southern India's largest state. This is wild Karnataka.
Do I have 2 more minutes? I don't have time. Okay. So thank you. So again, one of the joys of spending so much time in the forest and following is you never know what to expect. And while filming Wild Karnataka, we came across this what is called as a lekking behavior of our national bird, the peacock, which I haven't seen before. It hasn't been documented before. So it's a small 2-minute thing which I'll show you, and then I can take questions. Yeah.
This is the stage for one of nature's most dazzlingly beautiful spectacles. The competitive displays of peacocks. The males have been preparing all year for this gathering. This is their breeding season. Dozens of females converge on the display grounds to judge the competition. A peacock's tail is unfakeable proof of his vigor. The finest display will be produced by the fittest male. With so much at stake, tempers flare. chance to mate, a male will get around the earth. Only the most spectacular will be able to take it. Males take every opportunity to impress the P.E.s. With the audience assembled, the show can begin. The younger males watch from the sidelines. It will be 3 years before they have the plumage they need to take part. The adult males angle their vibrating trains to face the sun, so that their displays will look as brilliant as possible. The best dressed will enjoy an uninterrupted opportunity to spot their stuff. The owner of the most spectacular feather fan has now earned himself mating rights to all the females here.
Thank you.